at World Education, and in my work there I do research and provide a lot of technical assistance and professional development to mostly Title II funded programs across the US. A lot of that work is done through one of my projects, which is called Ideal Consortium. That's a group of state-level leaders who have a deep interest in growing or enhancing or improving the distance and blended learning opportunities available to the learners in their state. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is based on that, but it's also based on the fact that since the first week of March, my job has almost exclusively been providing technical assistance to people like you who have decided overnight that you're distance education teachers. And you might not have been that before March. So the speed that programs have had to move all of their teaching and support services online really highlights the need, I think, for equitable access to digital skills and quality distance education options. Our work providing this TA to adult basic skills programs and teachers has shown us that programs that had attended to some of these things prior to the pandemic have had a lot better luck. I'll just let someone mute before I go on. There's a little bit of feedback from someone.
Carla, I think you're unmuted, and I don't know how to mute you, but if you could mute yourself, that would be great.
Cool. So programs essentially have struggled if they hadn't thought about these things before, and I think the reason I point that out is I really don't think that we're in a situation where we're going to be going back to the old normal, where it's 100% in person all the time. I mean, I even know like South Dakota has had much fewer restrictions than some of the other states, including Minnesota. So you have the luxury of a little bit more in-person gathering with your teaching and learning. But I hope that you'll kind of take some of these suggestions with the idea that I think your goal going forward is trying to create the most flexible options available so that if you do have tighter restrictions down the road, if there's a second wave of the pandemic, you're prepared and you'll be able to adjust to this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the ways I would love to help you with this is to our website, and generally want to, otherwise I'm sure these will be shared out. This is our support website that we put together for distance and education, emergency distance ed, we'll call it. And every other Friday, we have a strategy session featuring 2 innovative topics. The other Fridays, we have small group and personal one-to-one coaching. So I encourage you to check out the calendar, the events down there so that you can actually register for some of these things. And you can listen to an archive of the webinars and the strategies that we've been presenting since March. Next slide. So it's through these distance ed strategy sessions, following the links discussion online, and then in a nationwide survey that I sent out to just learn more about the shifts, what programs we're doing. I've learned these things, that programs during the pandemic that have focused on sustaining connections rather than drilling down on academic progress have had more luck in staying connected with their learners. You know, kind of easing back on the academic rigor during the pandemic has a benefit, and that is that your students will look to you as a provider of support and connection, and want to keep looking at you in that way, so that when the pandemic ends, you still have this connection with your students, and they're more likely to come back to you. The other thing I've noticed is that practitioners are using technologies that students already know how to use, and then layering on new technologies one at a time. What I've seen happening is that teachers are using WhatsApp. Students, 97% of adults in the US, this is Pew Center research data, have mobile devices. All but 15% of those are Wi-Fi enabled. That doesn't mean they all have data plans, but they are all Wi-Fi enabled, and so learners can access learning from public Wi-Fi spots, public hotspots, or if they have broadband at home. And that is a great way to communicate with learners. So most of these teachers were using WhatsApp because they knew their students had WhatsApp on their phones already, and they knew they could at least access the text messaging, and then layering into other technologies through WhatsApp. So from WhatsApp, they would share screenshots of how to get into like Zoom so that they could get students all into the same Zoom session. From that Zoom session, they would have some, you know, easy conversational sort of stuff, and then maybe integrate introduction to a new technology like Burlington or like a Google Classroom where many learning resources are stocked. But the idea is to only start with what students have and only layer in one at a time. And then really strive to personalize learning, because students have so many other things going on during the pandemic. They're either really worried about holding onto their one job, have lost their one job, or might be working two jobs, or they're home with kids trying to both work and be a parent, as many of us are. So if you can personalize and make learning as relevant as possible, you'll have a much better chance of keeping students engaged. And the other thing that I noticed through these surveys and in conversation is everybody is feeling a lot of confusion about the fall. And because of that, you really need to set yourself up to maximize the flexibility of what you're going to be offering in the fall. So go ahead and go to the next slide, JennaRose. So the next, I want to start thinking a little bit more about the future here. So we've talked about confusions about what's going to happen in the fall, but one thing that can be said with certainty is that this is a great article from Medium. So Michael Moe and Vignesh Rajendran are both, they're like investors and they're technology leaders who have been thinking about ed tech recently. And they've noted in this Medium article that the dawn of digital learning is here. We are not going back across the country to strictly, like, you know, pen and paper, the old ways of being. Mostly because we've figured out that in most situations, a lot of places are finding that they're reaching learners they could have never reached before because they have to rely on the digital method. So, and it's providing a lot more flexibility for when and where learners learn. Next one. They've also, Mo and Rajendran also point out that, you know, we're in an unprecedented time here with just in the first few months or first few weeks of the pandemic, 30 million people were claiming unemployment. And it's put a lot of pressure on employers to reskill unemployed and furloughed workers at scale, like at a scale we've never seen before. And they're suggesting that the most innovative leaders, workforce development leaders, businesses, are going to start needing to think about how to allocate more spending on digital learning, because it is simply impossible to educate everyone in person. There is such a great need that we can't do this all in person. I'd like to add that to one more idea that's on the next slide. I'm sure that there are some of you who are sitting here right now, and you can understand that this shift to remote emergency teaching that you've done has been frustrated and hard to sustain. And so there's this interesting article from a couple of scholars, Charles Hodges, Stephanie Moore, some other instructional designer scholars have published this article in EDUCAUSE and coined this phrase, emergency remote teaching. They want to call out what's been happening in the last few months as something distinct from sustainable online learning. They're really worried that these hurried moves to what they call emergency remote teaching are going to redefine for people what they think online learning is, and seal this perception that online learning is difficult and stressful and really, really hard to make possible. When really what's happening in truth is that most of the programs, maybe not yours, but most of the programs that have had to rush to online really didn't have the time to put in the groundwork, do the research, do the educated guesses about what was going to work. So if you go to the next slide, JennaRose, they in their paper show this screenshot of this image of the categories of considerations that go into determining how your online learning should be shaped. And I'm showing this just as a point of contrast where, you know, all of these things need to be considered to create online learning. And if you don't have the time to do it, you're going to be in a situation where you're implementing something that's challenging, stressful, feels rushed, and is likely not sustainable. So next slide. So your new goal, I hope that you will leave your conference understanding that you need to move from remote emergency teaching, if that's what you were doing, to more sustainable distance education and workforce development training. And the way that you can do that, if you scroll to the next slide, JennaRose, is to pay attention to several components of your program. And I'm dividing these into two separate components that each have things under them, as you can see here. So there are foundational activities that you need to figure out how to do even remotely if you're going to have a strong distance ed program. That includes recruitment of students, screening them, and conducting orientation remotely. And then after you do that, and after you've spent an ample amount of time doing that orientation to students, that then you move into instruction. In other words, quality distance education, no matter how brilliant the product is way more than just handing out a URL and giving a login. Okay, so quality distance education does not start here on the right. It starts here on the left, and it's a very much a holistic programmatic perspective. If you want to read more about these things, there's the link to the handbook there, or you could just find it if you go to our ideal distance education page on the World Ed website. Head to the next slide. I've also made it possible for you to read, I last updated that handbook, I believe, in 2018, and things have changed obviously in the past few months. So if you go to our distance ed support site, there's a bit.ly link here for it on the screen. You'll see I've written some briefs. They're 2-page PDFs, and it takes the information that's in the handbook, which is like 160 pages or something like that, and it condenses it and updates it and kind of gives you a lens like, okay, now we're here in the pandemic. This is what we knew to work. And now this is how we have to implement it now that we're in this pandemic situation. We might be completely remote, or in the case of South Dakota, you might not be completely remote depending on what part of the state you're in. But you might be social distancing and trying to have less contact with fewer students and more contact online. So please do check out those briefs. Next slide. I also want to point you to this link again, these distance ed strategy sessions. This, for example, is what we talked about last week. There's an online literacy tool called the Change Agent, and we had a teacher from Hyde Park ESOL program, which is in Boston, talk about strategies for literacy development completely remotely using a free resource. And then 2 practitioners who run statewide distance ed programs for the state of Louisiana talked about how they used engagement data, learner engagement data, to provide targeted and relevant coaching to students. So this is an example of some of the stuff that we cover in our distance ed strategy sessions. They are absolutely free, and we would love to have you there to share your questions and perspectives. The format of these sessions is unique in that we have these 2 lightning talks with a very short Q&A after each one. And then we break into 2 breakout sessions where there's a 30-minute informal conversation with the presenter, and you can ask whatever you want to ask. It's a really great format. One other resource for you on the next slide. So there was this thing called the X Prize Communities Competition for Adult Learning, and in which there were 4 winning apps, and adult basic ed programs across the country got access to those 4 apps for free. And we came together in teams to see who would get the most students to use them. Well, our team, Team World Ed, won, which was great. We had the most teachers across the country getting their students to use 4 free apps. They were the 2 biggest ones were Learning Upgrade and CellEd. And we decided to take our prize money and create a resource website for any teacher in the US who wants to really have a mobile forward approach to their distance education. Really important, since what the facts I gave you a few minutes ago about how so many people have phones but not home computers. And on the site, you'll find the actual resources that were developed by the teachers from our winning team, plus other curated implementation support resources that I've come across since then. We've been building out this website a little bit every month and have a monthly webinar to showcase the work. So I encourage you to visit the website here, learn about the work that you can, like how you can contribute your own resources that you've made, and then also come to the webinars to learn about what others are doing. And then finally, I just want to say the last slide. So we have such a lot of work ahead that I really don't think that there's any one organization in any state that's going to crack the nut. I mean, we have unemployment, unprecedented levels of unemployment. We have new economies springing up around the fact that so much remote stuff is happening. And so we need all players on deck to build digital skills and support digital learning for adult basic skills learners across the country. So this is a big tent approach. This is one of our projects at the Ed Tech Center. So we are collaborating with innovative and supportive employers and nonprofits under this banner, Digital Us. It's a collaborative effort to support raising awareness and the connection between equity and the need to invest in digital skills. We have a report that you can access through this link. The report was a result of a landscape scan that I conducted last year, which describes gaps in service, educational service, digital literacy support services, access to technology, all of that, and the inequities that result from that. So it is absolutely true in the pandemic that communities that had less broadband connection and people with less comfort doing digital learning were more deeply impacted. They align. There's this great map from Chicago which shows digital like deserts where there's no access and COVID hotspots, and they absolutely align if you stack the two maps on top of each other. So we are now piloting a new program called the Digital Navigators Work, where we are working with employers who are interested in digital literacy development of their employees, grocery stores who are willing to have a digital learning corner, of course, Title II fund providers, Title I, workforce orgs, community-based organizations, and we have funding available for pilots to implement this approach called the Digital Navigator, where we provide training and resources, and then that non-traditional teaching person, this is not typically somebody who has been a teacher before, can use those resources to help get students, or the adult learners, the workers, the customers, the clients, information about connection and information about digital literacy, learning opportunities. So if you are interested in becoming a Digital Us pilot or learning more about this project, I would love it if you'd reach out to me. You can go to the next slide, JennaRose. And here's my email address. I would love to talk about any of the resources that I've shared. And just want to I guess, leave you with the parting words: planning will save you. Planning and creating flexible models to reach your learners in multiple channels is what is going to make the next year work for us as we face this tremendous uncertainty. And I also want to say, you as educators are the best people to be doing this. There are large employers who are going around our public systems of adult basic skills development and providing education directly to their employees. So we as adult basic skills educators need to really step up if we're going to stay relevant in this game, because employers know that there's a digital skills gap and they're going to start working to fill it. So I guess I'll just leave you with that, like a little glimpse of the future and how relevant your work is and how important your work is. And it's just, thanks for having me. I guess I have a few minutes if there are any questions for me right now, because I have to scoot very soon.
If you have any questions for Jen, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or to type any questions in the chat. So someone asked, what was the link to the digital resources?
Boy, I'm not sure which one they mean. Oh, back 2 slides. So go back 2 slides.
I know there's a little bit of a lag when I go back. So, okay, here we go.
Here, so this learning page. So really what I'm just going to put a link here, edtech.worlded.org. And if you go to this website, at the top of the page, you'll see a nav panel. And one of them says M-Learning. That's how you get to this page. And another one says something like tips for distance or something like that. And that's how you get to the other resource page. Any other questions? Okay, well, JennaRose, thanks for sharing so much of your time with these practitioners. And I'd love to stay connected with South Dakota and hear more about what goes on there. So would welcome a conversation. I hope to hear from you all.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, Jen. I know you are very busy, and have a great time with COABE.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my PowerPoint as soon as I can figure out how to do so. I'm new to GoToMeeting, so I'm currently trapped in this presentation.
I think if you stop sharing your screen, then you should be able to relink back up with what you want.
Perfect, thank you. I'm very used to using Zoom. All right. Okay, so now I need to figure out how to share my screen again. Chat box, I see the people.
Down at the bottom. If we cover
There we go. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. All learning new things right now. So with Jen, she's really got that big picture view, all of the research, all of the really wonderful activities that you can, collaborate with other folks across the country on. So I wanted to bring her in so you get kind of the big picture, and then for me, the littler picture when it comes to some tips for teaching with technology. This is something I'm really, really interested in. I personally, even though I'm in my 30s, I still struggled with technology. I didn't have access to it growing up because I grew up in the middle of the woods, homeschooled. So the first time I used a computer was when I actually went to college, and it was a huge barrier for me to not have those tech skills. So that's kind of how I ended up with a strong interest in technology and the ways we use to teach with it. So for today, I'm going to go over for you guys some information about blended learning, and then I'm going to give you some just easy tips to make things easier for your students to see when you're teaching with technology. We're going to talk about how you can do some troubleshooting on your own, and then we'll set some goals for tech skills that you want to learn on your own. So first, just to define blended learning, we usually define blended learning as a course that combines parts that are in a traditional classroom with online or distance portions. For Burlington English, we also make sure that those lessons are cohesive and mirror each other, so that when the students are doing work on their own independently, it really matches up with what you've taught in class. And my next slide here, we're going to go over some of the benefits of blended learning. So I'm going to have you all type into the chat. So wake up your fingers, get ready. I'm going to open up here some of these benefits of blended learning. So in this top row, if you have a birthday in the summer or in the spring, pick one of these items in the top row, and you're going to type in the chat, why do you think this is a benefit of blended learning? In our second row, if you have a birthday in the fall, you're going to look at these items here. And again, type in the chat, why is this a benefit of blended learning? And then if you have a birthday in the winter, let's look at that bottom row. Why do you think these are a benefit of blended learning? So for everyone, same question. How do these items show up as a benefit of blended learning? Yep, anytime, anywhere access. Yeah, so go ahead and then also take that one step further. How does that help your students? Yeah, any language can access learning and understand. That extended learning time, you can work at any point. I know I had students who, like Angela said, adults are busy. Some of my students had 9 kids and 3 jobs, and being able to extend that learning time in different ways really helps. Yeah, customized learning, students are at different levels. That's huge. That with that online learning component, you can really customize and assign to students at their exact level. Yep, digital learning can work everywhere. And when we're looking at that digital literacy piece, blended learning really, really helps with that because the teacher's using technology, which can help the student learn technology. Yep, exactly. That data-driven piece, I think, is also really huge because not only can teachers see, you know, what their students are scoring, how much time they're able to put in, what's going on, what their barriers are, but students can see their results too. Normally when a student's doing work, you know, on a phone or on a computer, they get to see their scores and their hours and their progress. So that data helps them with their own learning also. Awesome. Okay, so some good ideas coming in here. Yeah, the persistence and retention is huge because the student is consistent in working. They're able to make progress. Absolutely. Yeah, you can stay connected with students in a lot of different ways. And, you know, personally, I think, I hope after all of our pandemic things are done, we still continue to embed technology and digital literacy. So we're really prepared for these situations. You know, if you have, like in Minnesota, I'm sure many blizzards, it's nice to have a fallback option. So, okay, today we're going to do this lesson on our phones. We're all going to work together on a computer, things like that. Yep, that flexibility is very important for students. Our adult students have very busy lives, and yeah, it lets them go at a comfortable rate. So one thing I would always tell my students is, you know, computers are never going to judge you. You know, sometimes when you're having a conversation with a person, they might not understand you, they might be confused, but computers, you know, they aren't going to have that judgment with you learning a language. Yes, and that face-to-face time can be used to deepen learning and focus on trouble areas. Definitely, and even with, you know, face-to-face time, you can still do these virtual kind of meetings, like a one-on-one version of this with students to get some of that if you're not able to meet in person. Awesome. All right, so we'll move on here. My message to you right now is you can still do this. Many of the things that are really important to us teaching in a traditional classroom, you can still do these things with your students. You might just have to kind of reframe the way you do it or adapt it. But I'm sure you all know that many of these things you can still do. Whether it's being friendly with folks, you know, just commenting on, oh, your hair looks nice today or something. You can still do this in a virtual environment. You can still ask people how their day is going. You can still have students do things like Normally in a class, we might say, turn and talk to your neighbor or have this conversation with your neighbor. You might either break those students up into different meeting rooms in a Zoom meeting, or you might have your students pair up and exchange phone numbers and practice these conversations, you know, outside of class. Yes, and that remediation point too, that's huge. So next, we're gonna pop here into some virtual lessons and how to make these interactive. So I'm actually gonna, if I can, escape this. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That worked last time. And there we go. I'm popping over to Burlington English right now so I can share just one of the lesson pages. So this is an example. This is just one page in one of the Burlington English lessons. And there are a lot of different things we can do to make learning online really interactive for students. So for example, if I were to teach this lesson poorly, I might just say, who are the people in the picture? How do you know? What do you think they'll talk about? I might just read out these questions myself. But in order to make this more interactive, there's a lot of things I can do. I can look at the picture more closely and I can say, okay, one of my students, can you describe what the people are wearing? I might have my students take turns reading these questions out loud and then typing in their possible answers. And one thing that I really recommend that Burlington English does a lot in our curriculum is questions like this. Now you, how well do you know your neighbors? What do you talk to them about? So any topic, you know, you can add a question like that on it to really bring it back to your students and make it relevant to them, but also to make sure they're talking and using their English vocabulary to talk about this topic. So that's this question right here. This is just a really easy way to make things interactive for your students. Now you, how well do you know your neighbors? What do you talk to them about? That question, not that exact question, but you can reframe that question for really any activity that you're doing. The next thing I want to show you while we're online are 2 tips to make things more visible for your students. So 2 things that I have found to make things really easy for students to see. And one of them is to make your screen full screen. So if you see right in the upper right corner where my mouse is, if I click on this button, not there, right here, I can use this little square with the 4 corners to make my lesson fit full screen. So these settings are available, you know, in any browser you use. I'm in Chrome. I'm going to stop sharing so I can escape from this. But this is a really, I'm so sorry guys, I'm really struggling with the GoToMeeting controls. There. I'm just not used to. Okay. There we go. We're back. So that button to make my computer fit full screen, I just found in the upper right corner of my browser. In some browsers, it'll look a little bit different. It might look like arrows are kind of pulling apart the screen. But making my screen full screen while I'm teaching means my students aren't going to see all of my bookmarks or my address bar. They're not going to see all of the crazy things I've got open all over on my computer. And it makes it easier for them to see and focus in on what you're actually talking about. The second tip that I have found really, really helpful as far as teaching online is changing your mouse. Changing that cursor on your mouse to be a different size. So you can find this if you just search for mouse or mouse settings on your computer. It's going to open up some settings. So this one is the one I use to adjust my mouse and cursor size. So here I can actually make my mouse bigger, which will make it easier for other people to see. And I can do things like change the color. So if I wanted my mouse to be purple or some other color, I could change it. That just makes it easier when I'm pointing to things. And especially, you know, I remember teaching, I would have a lot of students say, I can't see that. This makes it much more easy to say, okay, I'm talking about unit number 1, lesson number 1. This is what we're working on today. Makes it much easier to direct people's attention around on the computer. Okay. So those are those visibility tips to change the size and maybe even the color of your mouse pointer. You don't have to do it as drastically as I did. But that's something that can really make sure, you know, you're connecting with your students and that they're actually seeing what you're pointing at. Before I learned how to do that, I kept on trying to point at my computer screen, like, can you see this? But in a virtual world, no, they cannot see where you're pointing. And then these are some of the other shapes that mean, you know, to make something full screen. Those arrows expanding, stretching, or framing are kind of those pictures that show you how to make something full screen. So those are 2 things I've learned. Next, let's have everyone type in the chat. Tell me something new that is tech related you've learned in the last few months since the start of COVID. So it could be something new you've learned for teaching, something else you've learned to help you with your job, or it could even be something that Jen just told you about. But go ahead and type in the chat something new that you have learned in the past few months that is related to technology. Yeah, how to set up a Zoom meeting. Yeah, for me, I knew how to set up a Zoom meeting, but I never knew how to share my sound. I couldn't figure out how people were doing that. I didn't know, I was just missing one little checkbox. How to write on a Jamboard meeting. I don't even know what that is, Stephanie. That sounds really cool. How to teach via Zoom. Yep, the Zoom stuff is huge. We do have some like tutorial videos on using Zoom and things like that too. I'm smarter than I thought with technology. You can do it. That's true. Absolutely. How to create a screencast. Okay, Debbie, I might be calling you because I have Jing on my computer. I learned how to make a screencast, but I haven't figured out how to edit or send that. So now I know where to go. And how to customize lessons. Yeah, so a lot of folks using Zoom, how to edit video and record only voiceover. That's super cool. Yeah, not an expert. Neither am I. I already told you, I grew up in the middle of the woods. I was not born with these tech skills. Yeah, I've been really surprised by how many different platforms and programs people have been using also. I feel like the first month of COVID, I was on Skype, I was on Google Duo, I was on everything, connecting with everyone in different ways. In Teams, okay, I still don't know how to do that. In 2 screens side by side, that is also super helpful. Yeah, definitely. Teachers are always capable of using technology, and many adult ed teachers were able to embrace tech faster than K-12. I can see that being true, you know, adult ed teachers. are very flexible and good at adapting because we're often thrown into kind of unstructured or chaotic situations. So we're used to being able to learn and think on our feet. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Those are some great tips. And now you know where to go if you need to learn how to do one of those things. So for 8 years, I taught computer skills for folks who were on unemployment. And let me tell you, they did not really want to learn how to use the computer, but they needed to learn how to use it to apply for jobs. So that was really tricky. But one of the biggest things I would teach in that class is how to apply a problem-solving technique to an issue that you're having on the computer. So these are some of the steps that I would really focus on when you're trying to do something on the computer, and really enable to, like, it lets you troubleshoot your own kind of issues. So I do this for my mom a lot. She'll ask me how to do something, and then I don't know how to do it. I just Google it, and then I tell her. But now I have to say, like, you actually have to look this up because I'm just Googling things for you. I don't actually have this just stored in my brain. Was not born with this knowledge. So these steps will really help you if you're getting frustrated by something you're trying to do with computers and technology. First, identify what you're trying to do. What do you want the computer to do? And when you're thinking of this, what am I trying to do? I really encourage you to remember also that computers are made by people. Technology is made by people. It's imperfect. A lot of times websites will be designed in new and crazy and exciting ways, and I just need to find where to log in. So think about, what am I trying to do? And remember that these computers were made by people. So a person put a button somewhere to help you do this task. Think about and look on the screen of what buttons are available to me. So like earlier, just now, when I was having trouble escaping my full screen window while in GoToMeeting, I had to really look around and see, okay, what was available to me. I know Kim had told me that I should stop sharing my screen to make those controls go away so I can reshare. So that really helped. And then coming up with a possible solution. Becky, your tip. Oh my gosh, it is hard to kill a computer. It's possible. If you throw coffee on it or something, like you take a hammer to it, as much as you might want to sometimes, don't do that. Take risks. So when you come up with a possible solution, like, does this do the thing I wanted to do? Try it. The worst thing that could happen is that it doesn't work and you have to try something else. Or you look like you don't know how to use technology in front of, 40 people in South Dakota. But those things are survivable. Think about whether or not you can find guides if you Google something. Think about whether someone else can help you or give you pointers. A lot of times, I am just not a detective when it comes to technology. I wish I were, but sometimes I don't even know what's in front of my face, and I need another set of eyes, whether it's a coworker or a partner or a child or someone, in your space, to say, okay, can you look at this? Can you tell me, what am I missing? That can really, really help save you when you're stuck with something in relation to computers. Another thing I'd really advise is to practice new technology in a safe space. So just like we really help learners by scaffolding and building, letting them practice together before they go out into the world, give yourself the time to do that with technology. So if you're starting up a brand new distance ed class and you've got 20 students, and you've never used Zoom, maybe the first thing you do is try Zoom with a coworker. Have a meeting, and then maybe you try it with one student, and then maybe 2 or 3. But let yourself try it in safe ways so it's not such a risky situation if things go wrong. Okay. So next, we're going to do a little bit of goal setting to finish out here. So just take a minute and you can type in the chat, or you can write a note to yourself. What is a tech skill that you wish you had? How will this skill help you? And what are 3 steps you will take to learn that skill? And not just, I'm going to Google it, but I'm going to Google the tutorial, and then I'm going to practice with my wife, and then I'm going to, try it at work, something like that. So go ahead, we'll give you a minute here to type up some answers into the chat. Yeah, so Stephanie, so you're saying some better editing, video skills. I definitely don't have those. So then thinking about what steps you could take to get those skills. Kim says, I don't want any more because then people will come to you for answer. Yep, that is a real possibility. To focus on a single task. Oh my gosh, good luck with that. I always have too many tabs and windows open. Ooh, and Kim is saying there's a session on video editing at Summer Summit. That's awesome. All right, so anybody else? Any tech skills that you wish you had? Creating some fillable documents that had better grading results. Oh, super cool. Do you think that's something you could do like in Excel, maybe? So John's saying recording a video chat. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and John, thank you for putting all 3 steps in there too, that students will be able to access that information later. Thinking about how this skill is going to help you is what really makes me take the step of encouragement to actually learn it. So for example, this week I thought I need to learn how to do a mail merge. I've never really done that before, but I think it would be really helpful in my work. I know this will help me because sometimes I have to send the same email to 100 different people, but I can't just blind copy them all because then it'll come up as spam. I need to do something like a mail merge, so that's really going to be great. And then the 3 steps I took to learn it were watching some videos and tutorials online, and then I practiced it just with one coworker. So I just had her information in an Excel spreadsheet that I was sending sample emails to. And that really, really helped me. And now I've got that skill that I didn't have before, which is really going to shave hours of tedious work that I was doing before. Yeah. Okay, some really great ideas coming in here in the chat. So seeing, yep, organization of information to have a better flow. Kim saying there's a grading feature that's in Google Forms. That's super cool. I didn't know that. Using Teams. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for sharing, and thanks for taking some time with Jen and I here today. So hopefully you got some of that big picture from Jen, where you can go for more professional development and collaboration around technology. They've got, a whole cohort of everyone doing distance learning at different states, and I know they would love to have South Dakota represented with the Ideal Consortium. And then from me at Burlington English, I will see hopefully all of you again at 3:15. So we're going to take a 15-minute break here and then talk about our new fully blended learning curriculum. And feel free to reach out to either Jen or I if you have any questions or comments. Happy to chat with you. And we'll finish out for today.
Thank you, JennaRose.
Thanks, Kim.
I guess we will see everybody back at 3:15, and it's the same URL, or the same ID number this afternoon. All right.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone.